Oh snap. Time change. Can do a video in the morning. Oh my God. The studio has light. I don't know why it looks so smudged. Let's clear that up. Smudged up. Smudge free. Anyway. This is Jeff Carroll, Sci-Fi Express Lane, about to express myself. If you've been on my page, some of my recent posts have been coming, my Facebook page, let me say, my recent posts have been going a little bit nuts on comments that I made about The Harder They Fall and comments that I made about the Eternals. And I think it's the Eternals one that I'm really going to try to address today. And not directly, but I want to talk about writing time period pieces, the past and the future, especially when it deals with space, right? Because space is a greater than Earth environment, and time is infinite, right? That's the best way to describe it. So when you're writing the pre-Earth history or non-Earth history, right? Or non-Earth related stories, meaning it happened somewhere in space. We don't know when Earth takes place. It really has nothing to do with Earth. It's a different ball game than when you're dealing with a post-Earth, Earth descended environment, because now when you have an Earth descended environment, Earth history is relevant and becomes canon, as they would like to say, right? Becomes canon. But when you're dealing with an environment that has no Earth relationship or exists pre-Earth, then everything that is earthly is questionable, right? So you can't have a James Brown. You can't have a Shakespeare. You can't have a China wall, right? You can sort of have human values, right? But you even got to be careful with the human values, because you don't want them to be so human that, or so generalized that they ignore other cultures, right? Because humans have more values than just the values that come out of the Western world. And even Earth stories ignore that. And they love to generalize and say, yeah, well, back in the day, we didn't know these things. And then you'll say, well, what about the Egyptians? Well, wait a minute. I was talking about, when man and woman first came out of the cave. Well, wait a minute. Everybody didn't come out of caves, yo. Fall back, son. But when you're writing a pre-Earth or non-Earth history, you can sort of do whatever you want to do with the behavior of the species, because they're not from Earth. But what you can't do is things like Ajax Spanish English accent. There's no explanation for that, unless you create that, right? Unless you explain that, unless you put that into a context that is explainable. Like there is an English speaking planet and Spanish people, and a Spanish speaking planet, and the Spanish people went to the English speaking planet and they Spanglitized it. That would be the only, one of the ways. Or, a person traveled from one planet to the other and they Spanglitized the English language. But the language and accent have a relationship that is very interesting. Now, the Spanish accent is just called something else, but you still got to explain, how do they talk like Vulcans, right? Well, they come from a planet called Vulcan. They're different, right? Or they come from a region of this particular planet that makes them speak this way. Whatever, you can make it similar to Earth. I don't care. It doesn't really matter how you explain it, although you do have to explain it. What else? Writing post-Earth stories are easy. The only thing you have to be mindful of is just like when you end the world and do a post-apocalyptic story, everything that happened after the apocalypse in Earth, because remember, you're writing a fictional story, so things are still happening, right? So I had, give you an example, I have a Harlem Shake, right? Harlem Shake takes place, I think, in 2016. Everything that happened after 2016 is off the table for me to write about. I can't write about Trump. He never made it to president. It's a beautiful world, but he didn't get there. I can't write about, the coronavirus. I can't. It never happened. Now, it can happen, but it will happen differently if I make something like that happen, right? If Trump becomes president in a post-Earth world, I can always have that happen because I'm the god of my story. I tell what happens, what doesn't happen, and all that. But I got to be mindful of the rules. So if I'm writing post-Earth, right, and they left Earth in 2000, sheesh, a whole lot of things. I have to go back to that mentality and not show, the bombing of the Trade Center, albums, movies that come out, all these social things that happen. America never got a Barack Obama, right? So all of that is, I have to be mindful. Now, all of that pre-2000 history is all on the table. And Shakespeare, Egypt, slavery, the Holocaust, all that is all on the table. It's canon because they left Earth after those things happened. So that's, interesting. Now, people ask me about Thanos and Thor, and those are interesting characters, but the reality is they have earthly relationships. You know what I'm saying? So, not necessarily Thanos. We don't know where and when he traveled to Earth. Most of the thing we think of is a little bit of lazy writing, not really lazy writing, lazy filmmaking in the sense that his people do probably speak a different language, but for the sake of the movie, they accept it, right? They say, well, everybody's just going to talk this because Marvel pretty much doesn't have any other language. Now, Thor speaks with an accent, right? But you can see Thor's accent because he has an earthly relationship. So either he brought the accent to the people of Earth that he speaks of because he's worshipped as a god, or he picked it up the same way they picked it up because he's been coming back and forth to Earth. You know what I'm saying? So that is the thing. So, but I think that's a little convoluted as well. I'm not going to say it isn't. I think it's a little messy, a little sloppy. But we accept it because it's just plain English. Like, we're not Groot, but what's the other one? Rocket. The little raccoon. He speaks English. I don't know if he's from Earth or not, but, English isn't Earth's only language, so sometimes that becomes convoluted as well, but we accept it because most of the characters that they create in these superhero movies that make it to the big screen are American or they're white, and you just accept that white people speak English, right? Even though English isn't the only language that white people speak. So that's, the main thing that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about that. Time travel. Time travel is confusing. It's a hot mess. It's very hard to do. The thing you want to do with time travel is to not have them go back and forth all the time, because then you can get confused as the writer, and you certainly can confuse your audience. And in terms of continuity, it's the same pretty much. If PreEarth and futuristic stories are subtraction and addition, time travel is like multiplication and division. So you have to be careful with what you put in your past and your future, the same way you had to when you're writing a futuristic story. Remember when you left Earth, everything after that is not on the table. And remember, and then if you're writing pre-Earth, non-Earth, kind of nothing is on the table. You have to recreate those things. I think Doctor Who kind of does that well, because he's a Time Lord and he travels all around through time. So, sometimes he has laws that he follows in terms of things that didn't happen yet, things that might happen. So he's still on our regular time schedule in terms of things that happen on Earth. Although things that happened after, he only says they may happen. And so he's, kind of strict with his time meter, that it goes may happen, happened, history, right? So there's two things. Present day, which is moving, what may happen, that's the future, and then everything after the present day is history. And history can change. You can change history. That's why they go back in time, but it is what did happen already. So anyway, hope this is not confusing. Me understanding this and learning how to write it is kind of what led me to some of my critiques in terms of the harder they fall, in terms of taking liberties with the characters and adhering to their characteristics and who they are, and my critique of the Eternals, which is really Salma Hayek's accent. I just don't understand it. I just don't think they explained it right. It's not going to ruin the movie for me. It didn't ruin the movie for me, but it is something that's like irritating, because it's something that I have learned and I'm learning to write, and it is a rule that I adhere to. So that's about it. I expressed myself kind of good. It wasn't no gripe or whatever, but I will say this: if you like it, hit that like button. If you want to hear more, subscribe. I'm nowhere near getting a lot of subscriptions. This is still a hobby that I've been doing for 3 years, on and off. The quarantine really helped out. I don't know what the quarantine did, but I enjoy doing it. So it's inspired me to write a book. Whenever I get to writing it, hey, I'm gonna write it. But it did come from me doing these blogs. So please like, subscribe, make a comment. Matter of fact, make a comment. Give me something that you might like me to talk about, share. You got questions for the writer? I'm the writer. Hit me with your questions. All right, peace.